you'll please join with me in an attitude of prayer as I call your attention as well to the words of the Reverend Cheryl M. Walker that I included in your order of service, this reminder that it takes practice or calamity to let go of our ideal selves and become vulnerable in prayer. That prayer is a way for us to allow ourselves to fully face the reality of our world, to confess our flaws and to see ourselves as beautifully flawed and worthy, not to focus too much on the clarity or the murkiness, but to see the whole complexity of ourselves and our world and those with whom we laugh, love, sing, cry, mourn, witness. As we pray today, we remember that this weekend is one that is celebrated as Veterans Day, as a hope, in Eisenhower's words, that we would hold up those people who fought on foreign shores and preserved our freedom, that we might not forget to promote an enduring peace in their name. But even as we acknowledge that, we know that this date has an artificiality about it, that 11/11 on 11/11 was actually the final travesty in a war that was filled with them. Because when the Allies accepted Germany's surrender, Germany wanted an immediate end to hostilities, and the Allies refused, because they wanted to go on fighting until the 11th so that they could pompously declare that the war to end all wars ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And in the time that meaningless fighting went on, it's estimated that some 10,000 soldiers from both sides were killed in a war that was, for all practical purposes, already over. We know that sometimes we get so attached to the symbolic, to the powerful symbolism and metaphor, the beauty of a round number or a time that will somehow live with greater significance if we just let that be the thing. But the reality is we know that all that we carry, we make meaning of it, and we understand it symbolically by virtue of us being meaning-making symbolic creatures. We don't need to hold out until the right date. We just need to show up. And so as we hold all of those joys and concerns that were brought into our space today, and we think about what it means for people to be engaged in conflict so many years after the war to end all wars, may we feel all of the complexity of that, the gratitude that we are here, that each breath we take matters, the awareness that people who make a difference in our lives can do so just by smiling in the right way, that we hold those who are concerned for their health, and we hold those who are excited that things went well in dangerous times. May we remember that it is true that joy and woe are woven fine, that we need to get vulnerable, to have empathy. When things go well, when things go wrong, we are the people who create understanding out of that. May it be so. Amen.
The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the generosity of all who join with us. The offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Thank you.
are always grateful for your generosity. Many, many years ago, I spent several days curled up in a bed that filled most of a small hotel room in Fez, Morocco. What was I doing there? I was reading the entire creative output of Jane Austen, of course. What else would you do in Fez, Morocco? As well as Tolstoy's Anna Karenina. If you'd asked me at the time why I was doing this rather than meandering through that beautiful ancient city, meeting new people, or savoring the extraordinary food, I would not have been able to answer. I was doing it because it was all my body or mind or spirit seemed capable of doing. I didn't let myself dwell too long on the why. I actually couldn't. I didn't have the capacity to ask that question. But once I'd completed the final page, I reemerged blinking into the North African sunlight, and I picked up my life where I'd left off before I had had a traumatic experience of somebody demanding my money when I did not want to give it to them. I went back out and picked up my life where I left off, doing the work of the world, the work that Mary Oliver puts this way. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. That is how I wanted to walk back out into the world after an experience that all I knew how to do was read Regency novels in response to. Why does it take, at least for me, I'm going to speak personally here, even though I just used we, but you can decide for yourself if this applies to you. It took me a long time of my life before I could reliably name the needs and necessities that would help me get back in touch with my essential being, with what it means to be grounded and whole and healthy. It took me a long time to realize that sometimes what I most needed to do was cry, but I didn't always know how to cry. Does anybody else have the movie that they know will help them cry? Mine is Little Women, the Winona Ryder, Susan Sarandon one. If I put that on, I know that I will be able to cry if I need to cry. A ridiculous piece of schmaltz, potentially, or the most beautiful and powerful therapeutic tool in the world. But it wasn't until I was, in my 30s before I realized that's how I was using the movie. I would put it in and not realize that I needed to cry. I just would put it in and start crying, and then I would be like, oh, I guess I needed that. So much of my life up to that point, maybe, at the point of recognition, was one of, I guess I just need to do this, read novels by long dead authors and be sad that they have only written that many. I did it again, reading all of those Regency novels and Anna Karenina right after 9/11. That's when I realized that I was actually using it as a tool to return to again and again. Something about finishing that selection of literature allowed me to go back into the world, not having made meaning, but having done something to help me repair a soul that was in deep distress. I think that in our current cultural milieu, it's not surprising that we don't always get asked the question, what do you do to help yourself feel better again after something horrible has happened in your life? What do you do to help yourself feel better when you look out at the world and what you see is pain and suffering and complex situations that people try to reduce down to the simplest possible answer when we know that there's no such thing? How do you care for your soul? How do you repair it? I believe that there are real harms that come to us and to our world when we fail to figure out what our bodies and our souls and our spirits and our minds and our hearts need to express or to release in order for us to move back out into the world with stability and groundedness. To return again to the broken complexities of geopolitics or family dynamics, of grief or love. To learn to cultivate appropriate anger, by which I mean anger directed at the right source rather than anger spewed everywhere because someone has failed to identify what's really hurting. Or unfettered, unbridled, toe-tapping joy, the kind that kids are able to show us, but that we may have forgotten how to express ourselves because age and relationships have brought us to a place of self-consciousness. So for those of you who were here yesterday, you were treated to a musical feast due to the hard work of Christy Brooks and Linda Wilson and Jeremy Berlin and Delaney Pickering and Andy Herr. And each of those people, in offering their energies for our community, were offering a model, a demonstration of what it looks like to engage in care and repair in different ways. This is the second of these concerts that they've had, and each time, both times, the thing that keeps on showing up is that people remark about the infectious joy of these musicians, the delight they visibly express on their faces when they play off of each other, when they lose themselves in music, and that interplay of two people sort of finding sync and losing it and finding and losing it again, when they throw that into their music, and those of us who are present get to witness something holy. And yet, one thing that I feel as though I'm hearing a lot lately is shame or guilt that we would enjoy something when there is so much that is broken or breaking around us. How does it serve us, ourselves or our world, if we look out at the world and focus only on the sorrow? Is a gorgeous fall Saturday afternoon spent in a wood-warm chapel a way to ignore our responsibilities or a way to remind ourselves about the ever-present beauty and possibility if we live our single human lives as fully and openly and vulnerably as we can? Because that's the way that we start to understand how important it is to work toward universal justice and love, to work toward ending senseless violence, to work toward calling out casual cruelties or biases, the things that prevent those with whom we share a planet from gaining full access to their own joy. We need more opportunities like those elegies to the human spirit, ways to celebrate what's still whole and soul nourishing, even when, and especially when, there is much that breaks our hearts. We are surrounded by examples of human cruelty and complexity. We go for walks on beloved trails and find new things that break our hearts, that force us to ponder climate crisis and the impacts of careless human consumption and greed. We read stories from Ukraine or Israel or Palestine or Sudan or Maine, and the weight of these stories threatens to send us spiraling into deep and inexpressible sorrows, to climb into bed and pull the covers over our heads, to read Mansfield Park yet again. What then? What I want to offer you today is a reframing, to orient our lives back to spiritual renewal, to recognize that the care and feeding and repair of our souls and our spirits is in fact the best thing that we can do in light of all the complexities that assail us in the world. The Costa Rican diplomat, Christiana Figueres, who was instrumental in bringing countries to the table for the Paris Climate Accords, shared this observation in an interview. The very same interaction, the very same experience can be either mundane or spiritual. The only difference between the two is how I live it. The same thing can be either mundane or spiritual, The only difference is how I live it. In that interview, she describes the necessity of constructing meaningful spiritual infrastructures if we have any hope of passing on to our children the world they deserve, which was a way of talking about how important it is to nurture the human will and courage, the loving agency, the muscular hope to step fully into what we've been called to do. That is how that was described in the interview. We need to find ways of cultivating that spiritual infrastructure, of building it for ourselves and others in both personal and community ways. We need to recognize that that's what we are doing when we come together in community. We are building up the strength of our spiritual infrastructure that we might be able to withstand the things in our world that hurt and harm. That we might be able to go out into the world and do what we can to bring some kind of slowing down to the hurt and the harm. And we need to learn our own selves well enough to be able to identify when and how to call upon that infrastructure. My life feels crumbly. What around me can I lean on now to rebuild and repair my spirit? So I want to ask you, I asked earlier, but I'm going to actually ask you to talk to somebody now. Do you have a reliable tool that you go to when you need emotional release or grounding? So think about that for a second. And then talk to somebody around you. Share your tool with them, that they might share their tool with you. Take a few moments now.
I'm wondering if we all should unmute the Zoomers.
We can, probably by the time we get this done, they'll be back.
We can do it after. We can do it after.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my concern is that they might be hearing us through the speakers in the chapel.
So, Marquetta, something in the chat. Yeah.
Yep, I see.
It's exercise. I can.
Thank you all for sharing. One of the things that I think is essential is that we understand what helps other people to ground. Sometimes so we can borrow their things, and sometimes so that we can help them when we see them in a state of maybe ungroundedness to say, hey, you told me once that this was powerful for you. Might you need to go spend some time there or with that person or in that activity? Because the more people around you who know those truths about you, the easier it is for you to receive that spiritual infrastructure support that I was talking about. My colleague David Schwartz suggests that religion is primarily about gratitude. Thank you for that. Not belief, not faith, not your relationship to either of those things, because no matter what your beliefs or your relationship to faith or to grace, gratitude is something that we can all practice. And that makes us all religious. But it's important to remember that gratitude is both a feeling and a spiritual practice. It is something that does not come to you unbidden. It is a discipline that you have to invite in. You need to recognize that it has power in your life to name gratitudes, to say, I miss my kangaroo without the heart, and I love my kangaroo back in my life with all my heart. The gardeners among us are probably understand that cultivating gratitude is like generating healthy compost. We might cling to the scraps of our lives, our messy emotions, our challenging experiences, our unspeakable loss, the murky water, but then when we are ready, we let ourselves toss these things onto a pile, and through the magic of time and heat and neglect and a solid therapeutic turn now and then, we generate fertile material out of which to grow beauty. The garbage of our lives, the garbage of our world, if we can bring ourselves to deal with it, has the capacity to become flower. Mary Oliver wrote, "Don't hesitate. If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate, give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back. That sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, maybe what was just shared with you, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Recently, a minister friend of mine moved across the country to start a new ministry after decades in her previous home. She packed up her treasures, each one a nostalgic or symbolic reminder of the relationships and experiences that brought these belongings to her care. And arriving in her new home on the other coast, she began to unpack the 20 boxes that she had shipped through the post. And the first box, she picked it up and she heard the unmistakable tinkle of broken glass. In fact, most of the first few boxes had kitchen stuff, the majority of which was shattered. The champagne flutes, she says, I don't even drink champagne. The beautiful blue antique wine glasses that her first spouse bought for her. He had clinked every single glass in the store to find ones that created a sound chord that he wanted to share. The plates that she had bought in recent years, all gone. But the plates that she had packed up, the ones that her mom had given her when she said, I don't want plates at my wedding, and her mom couldn't help but avoid doing it anyway, she had packed them up and left them in storage for so long, and now they are her only dishes. And she says, philosophically, I am so glad. She could envision her mother saying, I told you so. She recalled the words of a friend who, unlike her, had moved often and almost always lost some beloved keepsake or treasure in the process, which caused her to learn to be grateful about the things that don't break. Full stop. Whatever you have in your life that feels broken or that shatters, that had value, be grateful about the things that don't break, or the ways in which the things that do break provide for you greater understanding. My friend's story of shatter and release and gratitude, that range of emotional truth when things that were stable feel less so, Haven't we all had those experiences? I feel like sometimes we try to keep them hidden from one another. But that goes against the idea of spiritual infrastructure. Don't we need to share the things that make us vulnerable, the ways in which we hurt, the things that are broken in us, the things we fear are broken in those around us or the world? What might be possible if we could trust that those around us are interested in accessing the full range of their emotional lives and living into the paradoxes and complexities? The challenges of our lives and our world can sometimes make our waters murky and cloudy, and we find it too easy to focus on the impurity and the muck. And we forget that the water itself still makes up the vast majority of molecules in our emotional and spiritual cups. It is useful water, it is beautiful water, and powerful water, and cleansing water. It is made up of our tears. It offers clarity and rainbows and nourishes every living thing, even if it's a little bit off color. Let's focus on learning how to fill our cups with that water made up of the molecules of our emotional lives. Let's focus on what's still here, what we haven't lost, what we still have the capacity to grow. I'm going to close with Mary Oliver again. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and I gave up. And I took my old body, and I went out into the morning and sang. May we now let ourselves go into the morning singing our closing hymn. You may not be familiar with this one, but I encourage you to sing with the full voice that Mary Oliver suggests she could not summon. The words are on your order of service. Do you want me to do the hymn? Oh, nice guitar. Do you want me to do the melody? Do you want me to sing the melody through once, or do you want to just do it?
I was going to do like a little the end and then just go right into
You
it.
good? All right. So it's a relatively easy tune, and you'll pick it up as we go along, and even if all you have is a single line to add into it, that's fine. I am who I'm becoming. I am who I'm becoming. I am all I have done. I am what I am dreaming. I've only just begun. I am who I'm becoming. I am invite us to do a benediction and then take your seat again so that we can receive the postlude. But as we prepare to leave this place, beloveds, I invite you to make a connection with the people near you. Stand, find some way to connect. If you don't want to be touched, you can put your hands over your heart. If you don't mind touching, you can touch a shoulder, touch a hand, connect. This is our spiritual infrastructure, at least in some capacity, some web of infrastructure. And we say this, we say worry or don't worry, laugh, cry, love, find hope, and lose it again, or lose hope and find it again and again and again. Make of your joy more than a crumb, and don't forget to sing, sing, sing with the fullness of gratitude for all that is. May it be so. Amen. Grab a seat. Grab a seat now, please.
Sun has left